22. Texas citrus farms along the Rio Grande have survived hurricane floods to regenerate 70% of normal harvest, until the recent end of river flow enough to support two-nation sharing and crop irrigation. Every tree, new or old, needs 5 years of sufficient hydration to begin or sustain fruit production. In 2022, all reservoirs along the Rio Grande plunged from an average 37% full down to 30%. 2023's precipitous river drying to end all crop irrigation prospects I covered in a speech. All over the world, when many parched crop failures soon become all, then your food and water come from where? Do I gotta make everybody a sign? Plan ahead. PLANAHEAD. The joke is visual, not audio. The lettering artist runs out of space on the right and has to ink in the D below. On February 25, 2024, UN humanitarian coordinator Jaime McCullough replied to an Israeli spokesperson who demanded that UN staff from the UN Relief Agency, that Israel and all major supporters have denied any more funding to, needed to show up for work. Jaime said, "We only have days of money for supplies, delivery, and distribution left, and only a few of the many hundreds of trucks needed for Gaza's exploding famine, or medical supplies for hospitals, all now ruined and not in operation anyway, are allowed in by Israel and Egypt." World News for weeks now reports that our trucks travel only a tiny distance into South Gaza before both thousands of starving and aggressive gangs wanting black market supplies set upon most trucks, beat up resisting drivers, and instantly strip all food and water off the trucks. The vast percentage of Gazans have gotten no supplies for weeks. Dysentery and other filthy sewage diseases are sweeping Gaza. From these, the most deprived and ill children are being carried to non-functioning hospitals in ever-increasing numbers, already dead. Israel states that unless all hostages are returned by an early March Arab religious holiday, Ramadan, the IDF will bomb and invade Rafah despite the 1.5 million homeless Palestinians on site and unable to obey orders to evacuate after being driven in from all the rest of obliterated Gaza. The recent third sole American veto of a UN Security Council ceasefire and massive aid funding and increase order, including delivery security, continues the war and civilian holocaust against overwhelming world population and nations' demand to stop both. Certainly, thousands of surviving Hamas fighters should negotiate full release of hostages for large Palestinian prisoner release, although most plan to die fighting or rebuild their military resistance after a ceasefire, rather than survive in the only Israeli militarized Gaza the victor has planned for another century. The current bombing, invasion, and siege holocaust Israel publicly plans to last all year of 2024. World citizens surrender, as if we ever learned of any other choice, to warrior businesses and 300 million butchery dictatorship since 1915, continues to the imminent end of the world by rather exact expansion, 25,000 miles around, of Gaza's perfect horror storm. All continuously caused by actual law, 100% opposite of law, Crazy Steve demands. The world arms bazaar remains utterly unlimited or regulated, despite all deliveries actually being thousands of undeclared invasion wars, in violation of hundreds of national constitutions. Most of its sales for taxpayer billing is sprung by legal bribery of campaign cash delivered to legislators in return for their appropriation bill robbery of you and me. And the rest pours directly to thousands of militias scarfing their buyer funds from countless thefts at gunpoint, or other compulsory tax, drug cartel, and black market operations. Stop all this and save the world too by removing all political support from all branches of government staff, not flogging new laws to forbid any weapon or ammo sale, not directed only at users, authorized by your congressman's declaration of war. Not just generic, illegal, kill anybody appropriations bills. You do realize that a total end to all weapons production leaves the poor, deprived warriors only enough force to kill a mere 50 billion for another century, don't you? Hence your treaty to also destroy 99.999999999% of present scorched earth stocks. Now the never united nations driving only Holocaust, an American, Russian, Chinese, and their war weapon delivery clients' single veto dictatorship over 100% of world citizens powerless for peace and survival victims. The world macrocosm of hundreds of corrupt 1% top dog national dictators. No different than all his stories, 1,000 kings and 16 emperors always driving their 99% slave populations, forced to build the weapons, collect the cash, raise the armies, and fight and die for their masters. This system is less original evil and more hard law, bent to enriching commerce that a billion or so enjoy fat livings for enjoyment with wives and kids, who all pursue benevolent, off thievery and war duty, ignorant society for the few years we all have left. My speeches have only 3 parts. What keeps happening, law to stop it, and who makes it, baby? First, achieve ceasefires in Ukraine, Gaza, Yemen, Sudan, and the other worst inflows of world weaponry, just to keep 9,000 nuclear bombs on their launching pads. Next, demand immediate national and international law to stop weapons manufacture, sales, and delivery directly proved to have inflicted the last decade's several million documented war, drug cartel, and other criminal murders. Never mind that most leaders and war businesses falsely claim their sales and wars legal. Your answer: you have a point, a weak, quite horrible point. Now hold still while our infuriated billions' legal revolution kicks your weapon death-dealing asses. Sue for public, no more private campaign finance. achieve that, and most weapons appropriation bills lose by 80%, I promise. Hammer these measures first world movement, then world treaty-wide. Force 30-day trigger and launch locks on every nuclear weapon, only unlocked by emergency 90% congressional votes, and 100% money, goods, and communication embargo of every treaty rogue power that refuses. Jonathan Schell's The Abolition pushed 6-month nuclear dismantling, not destruction. Both schemes press safety before disarmament to back up our doomsday clock a few lousy minutes. Begin slow but constant nuclear weapon destruction on world TV. As per emergency anti-nuclear pact demands you make of world leaders who've never stopped spouting excuses why they continue to abrogate nuclear non-proliferation treaty disarmament of nuclear and conventional forces signed almost 6 decades ago. Emergency sue in every nation to promptly begin lawful nuclear and conventional disarmament within days of federal and Supreme Court orders to begin it in days by hard, specific, mutual process with other national court orders now. Years of big badass holding out gets tougher when the world majority embargoes their asses to depression. Upon our leader and court refusals, demand enlargement of every court with judges committed to constitutions, from their inceptions ordering no war or certain driving of it except representative declared will of the peace-loving people. One dictator can launch in 1 second unrecallable 8 billion death extinction at 17,000 miles an hour with no one's permission, 1,000% illegal, outlawed, and stopped the second enough of us, harmed by a mere fist, all the world human beings say it is. Speaking of trigger locks, keep up suits to limit every single gun owner to easy existing technology to prevent firing by any other thief or trafficker. Suits presently underway. Corrupt monsters will refuse some of this for a few years, so you make their leader power lives increasingly shaky and miserable until they crack. You rush from world education, movement, treaty spread, and badass embargoes, plus 100 world love and help sweeteners. If despots and their desperate, enraged populations quickly agree to end insane leaders' careers who are now ending all humanity, including their own dumbasses and terrified kids. What else must our NNPT enforcement lawsuits, plus rushed new border defenses only, swords into plowshares treaty mandate? I note such laws throughout my speeches, so I'll just mention a couple now. A world stop war force 10% Army contributed to by every signatory. Funds and food and water and medicine and home and economy construction enough to restore to decent life every war zone we blanket, with enough light and medium military force to make murdering warriors stop before they take 10 times the casualties they attempt to cause. Such militarily strong peacekeeping forces, sprung by an 80% vote of treaty peace nations, never mind any UN single veto world murder dictatorship, remains temporarily necessary only until disarmament worldwide dries up 100% of the World War gasoline that incinerated 1 billion over 10 millennia. All this disarmament too elaborate and utopian to accomplish? Absolutely. While 8 billion doomed sleep until terrifying, sad, extremely wakeful holocaust of multiples of war and life support ending horror. Then, of course, it's way too late to fix squat. So change my book title to Wake Up! You jump now on uncertain, fiendishly difficult peace law fast because leaving the jackals in charge of our 195 tax treasuries denies even 1% of your money needed for booming new fresh water to forests and farms before everyone dies. And emission CO2 quintuples to only flood 10% while scorching every other water body gone. Only peace treaty money to build desalination, condensation, and flood collection infrastructure, plus power piping all to refill lakes, gives your youngsters a chance in hell to live to pick a college still open. Get the pick, Vic? Are you with the plan, Stan? Think you're able, Mabel? Nobody else gonna save us, Mavis. Okay, let's jump off World Treaty, Humanity Rescue Law, and on to several national government corruption reforms, certainly also necessary for all financial power and new human care government to spring the huge swords into plowshare funds to buy and run the thousands of CO2 scrubber plants and fresh new water collection and delivery complexes that 8 billion are mighty doomed, mighty fast without. New anti-corruption law only can make possible 100 of every 100 other world-saving laws and projects. We must demand of courts and legislatures law to constrain executives and regulators in the executive branches from all employment choices, essentially pro-private business advantage against public interest in controlling businesses for public protection, not abuse. Forbid government-specific business oversight and regulation departments from hiring careerists from the more than potentially misbehaving companies themselves. And certainly rule against government regulators hopping, a few years later, right back to rich business private jobs with companies that will, for those years, if we don't forbid it, dangle such fat career job rewards in return for public harming, business coddling, non-regulations created by the damn foxes guarding our consumer prey hen houses. And you do understand that executives on the take from businesses hire those very foxes to make bloody meals of the 95% of the non-business, non-bribing, mere product consumers and voters, don't you? So we not only must outlaw cash gifts to all leaders and candidates, but also every brazenly filthy anti-public conspiracy of the private job, public care sabotage revolving door to return governments to their purpose of stopping private entrepreneur corruption, of no longer public government behavior, instead of deliberately, criminally, anti-democratically designing the entire rocket to blast all human abuse and murder to the moon. That's right. Just before those donors finished killing the nation and world they stole, you and I have decided to take back both for us all to live, not die in. You do understand that my speeches are mostly your constitutional lawsuit ammo. Fail to pack in a few more clean Supremes, though, and uncorrupted presidents and lawmakers, too, and we're all toast. Dry toast. Care to hear a few true stories, executive branch examples of fat cats stealing our tax trillions to murder us little kittens for even more cash? Our last billionaire president appointed a man to not lead but destroy the American Environmental Protection Agency. The perfect candidate with a history of the same polluter coddling from his Colorado government jobs, also normally created to protect the public against dangerous special interests, not exactly vice versa. This jackal had long since entered government from a career working directly for pollute-for-profit companies. His following state and national public regulator assignments to destroy from the top inside government supervision of his former and obviously still current private company bosses. Once done with their public sabotage, such clowns almost always return to even fatter private positions, teaching the new generation of industrial bribers, donors, more of his especially demanded, insider-learned, government-twisting quid pro quos. Yet another description and example of the public-private revolving door that your lawsuits must outlaw entirely. We must appeal for law to prevent employees of companies awarded or seeking government contracts or presently just constrained by government regulation against endangering the public. Stop them from ever holding elected or appointed government jobs empowered to stop or in fact help their former and still today business profit bosses to hurt the public. Also, current government employees, including legislators, with such help or hurt us power, must be prohibited from retiring to any government regulated by or in federal business with company, obviously drooling to use their insider expertise in neutering public control of these businesses and sabotaging public protection from them. One Speaker of the House warmly sent off 67 staffers to private company government lobbying jobs. Everybody knows who scratches whose back and which side our bread is buttered on. Outlaw butter and back scratchers or we're dead meat. One president's Department of State was asked by a high-tech communications company for a waiver permitting them to sell guidance systems to our Chinese nuclear missile enemy. Normally against State Department rules prohibiting American companies from selling technology to adversaries who could then use it to kill us. Well, duh! Obviously, horror and profanity resounded through the department, and the rejected stamp slammed down. Then a call to the secretary came in from the Democratic Party, if not the Oval Office itself. The appealing company had greased all skids with a $640,000 payment to the president's political party's campaign fund. Boom! Deadly waiver granted. So then, guidance systems capable of narrowing accuracy of nuclear missiles from miles to feet were ever since most helpful to our Chinese nuclear enemies for aiming 2 to 20 megaton monsters right down your chimneys, suckers. Personally, I'm even madder about war profiteers and bribers forcing abrogation of our 57-year-old ban all nukes treaty. That very president's wife years later became Secretary of State herself. Another murderous waiver request came across her desk. She and her former president husband had a foundation always raking in a fortune in government influence-seeking company dough. A Canadian industrialist proposed buying up half of America's H-bomb fueling uranium and selling it at a fat profit to our nuclear archenemy Russia. Outrageous! Until he sank umpteen millions into the Clinton Foundation. Boom! Waiver granted. 12 months of world media angry firestorms followed until Hillary finally relented. Okay, keep the uranium, just don't sell it to Russia. I don't know if her second rule has stayed in force years later, but Vladimir is now threatening Ukraine with nuclear war with countless tactical but still monstrous nuclear weapons. I got every horror story from my arms race library. I couldn't make this stuff up, folks. 100 free-to-be-bribed governments have 100-year history of stimulating world war and every other kind of armed murder for profit, murdering most of 300 million. Stop the money, honey!